On the first reading today from the book of Kings, we hear the story of one of the greatest prophets in the Old Testament, the prophet Elijah. Elijah, he has predicted a drought on the region, and God has asked him to go and live in the desert. So he goes and lives in the desert near to a stream of water. And then when the stream of waters dries up, God asked the prophet to go to this widow that we hear on the first reading today. So he goes, and when he sees this widow, she's picking up sticks. She's about to prepare her last meal because she doesn't have any more flour. So she's planning to prepare her last meal for her and her son. And then after that, she was ready to die. Well, the prophet comes and he is asking her to prepare something for him. So she might be wondering what to do. He has to make a decision. Is it prudent to give the little that she has to the prophet? And she knew Elijah was a prophet. So the prophet is telling her that if she trusts, then the flour is not going to stop. It will provide enough so they don't die. So we see some drama here because she has to make a decision. Should she trust in the prophet, in God? Should she do what the prophet is asking? So we see that she has to make this decision. And then she does. She trusts in God. She places her trust in God. And we see that the miracle happens. She doesn't have to die, and her child. So God provides for them. So the flour continues to provide for their needs until it rains again. It's a beautiful image of God's providence. We have to trust in the Lord. God is good, especially to those who are poor, to the little ones, to the ones who are struggling. God never forgets them. God always provides for the poor, for the little ones. That's who God is. His heart is always moved with pity and compassion, especially for those who are in greater need. Today in the gospel, we see even more drama. We see the scribes and the Pharisees talking with Jesus. Well, Jesus before, as you know, he went to the temple. He walked into the temple, and then he expelled the money changers. He drove out everyone who was selling there. And Jesus was angry at the temple. And he is telling the religious leaders that they had converted the house of his father in a cave of thieves. So he's calling them thieves. They are stealing from people. That's what he's telling them. And that's why after he expelled all these people from the synagogue, from the temple, they are thinking about killing Jesus. They wanted to kill Jesus. They wanted to take him away from the way. So that's why they started thinking about killing him. Because the idea that he's bringing to the people. And then he's telling them, and he says, beware of the religious leaders, because they like to wear long robes. They like to be admired. And he's telling this to his disciples as he's telling us to us. We are to be careful with this. Because sometimes our temptation is also to be admired. And that's why sometimes we probably drive ourselves by buying certain things so people can admire us. So the vanity and to look good before the people. That's sometimes the temptation that we have as well. But Jesus doesn't want those attitudes among his followers, his disciples, Christians. So it's not about being admired, being praised by everyone. And then he is telling his disciples that they are to beware of the religious leaders also, because they like to be greeted at the marketplaces. So they like to be revered, so people can kiss their hand and to be admired by people. So that's another attitude that we are to be careful with. That people revere us, respect us. And sometimes we hear, well, we are to always respect the religious leaders. Well, not in the sense that we have to kill their hands and all that, but we are to be careful with that as well. And then Jesus is telling his disciples that they like to be seated in important places at the synagogue. So when there was a rabbi, they were making some room in the main place in the synagogue. So the rabbi was going up before all people, and then the people were admiring the rabbi, hoping to hear some wisdom on his words. The rabbis were the ones who were interpreting the scriptures. I mean, they were studying for 40 years, and then their hands were laid on them, and they were receiving the spirit of Moses. So they were taken up, and then everybody was admiring them. They liked it to be seen in the main place. And Jesus is bewaring his disciples not to do that. Not to do that. And then they like to take important places at banquets. They were going to the owner of the house. They were sitting right next to the owner of the house. So the first ones to be served were the owner of the house and the rabbis, the religious leaders. Jesus is telling them, no, don't be like them. No, because the Christian is to serve, not to be served. And then that was separating them from the people. So they were to be with the people, to relate with the people, to be involved with the people. So no distinguishes, no different ranges. So all of us, we're brothers and sisters. So Jesus is bewaring his disciples. And then he's bewaring them also of the long prayers. They like to say long prayers, so the widows will admire them, and then the widows will give them their money. And that's the only thing that Jesus is saying here. These people, he said, the ones who exploit the widows, the poor ones, will receive a very severe condemnation. He's warning. He's warning his disciples not to do the same, not to be like them. And we Christians, we are not to do that. We are not to exploit other people or to take advantage of other people. So he's being clear on that. And then when he's in the temple, he's seeing this poor widow. In Jesus' time, the widows were the ones who were the more poor ones, because when the husband was dying, all what the husband had was not going to his wife, but was going to his children. So the sons first were going to inherit everything that the father has. And if there were no sons, the daughters. And if there were no daughters, a relative. But no, the wife. So they didn't have possessions. They didn't have anything to survive. And that's why Jesus is admiring this poor widow, because she has only 2 coins. And she is giving everything that she has. She's giving everything that she has. But she's being so generous. Sometimes we priests, we use this passage to talk about the importance of giving to the church. So sometimes we talk about it. That's not the main message here. But Jesus is telling his disciples, because when he tells his disciples, they go, they admire the temple, and he says, I assure you that there is not going to be a stone left of this building. The temple is going to be destroyed. So what Jesus is seeing is that the people, these religious people, were taking advantage of people. They were exploiting people. And that's his point. He's telling his disciples, look, be careful. Don't be like them, not to take advantage of people. You know, the scribes and the Pharisees, they were looking at themselves, caring about themselves, the good image, the power, the wealth. That's what they were concerned with. And Jesus is telling us, don't be like them, because if you do that, then you may take advantage of people. You may exploit them. You may cause suffering to them. So he's warning them. And yes, this widow was so generous, but she was given to the wrong institution. So the first catechism that we had in the church, the Didache, this catechism says that we are to give to other people because they are brothers and sisters, and be generous by giving. And but it says also that we are to save our money to make sure that the people that we're helping are in real need. So we are to be very careful with who we give to. But whenever there is a need, a good need, we are to respond and to be generous. Yeah, we are to be careful with giving. But when there is a need, we are called to respond and do something about it. That's what Jesus is telling his disciples. And we are to trust as well. The Didache also talks about, the first catechism talks about that the people who are not in need and they are asking, you know, that they will also be brought to judgment as well. So we are to be generous, trusting in the Lord. That's what we saw in the first widow in the first reading today. She gave everything that she had. The second one, she was so generous too. And that's the call that we have, to be careful, not to be like the scribes and the Pharisees, but always to be ready to be present to those who are in need. Especially when we know a real need, to respond with a generous heart. Because God loves us so much, and He's always generous to us. We are to imitate our Father, who loves us deeply, and who never forgets about anyone who is in need. Amen.